All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome in. So, I don't know about you, but I know when I woke up this morning, I was definitely feeling a mixed bag of emotions, right? Obviously, super pumped that the Jets won last night in walk-off fashion. So happy for Xavier Gipson and just how that game ended. A punt return in overtime in front of a packed MetLife Stadium, given how the game went early on, to hang in, stay in the game, and defeat not only just a great team in the Bills, but a division rival it does not get any better than that. But of course, we have the dark cloud looming, the Aaron Rodgers injury, which looks to be right now an Achilles. As far as the official announcement of the injury and the timetable and whatnot, that has not been released as of right now. As far as the actual time of this recording, maybe something happens in the meantime, which of course I'll do a separate video on. But it's like your first thought is what's going to happen with the season. I got multiple texts and calls last night from people that literally said, like, after that, like literally once Rodgers got taken back on the cart, season's over. I'm turning it off. There's not a point watching. And, it sucks. It absolutely sucks to be in this position. But it's football. It's Joe Douglas's job to have a plan B. I mean, at the end of the day, again, it's football. It's a contact sport. We all know the field that the Jets are playing on at MetLife Stadium. We all know the track record of injuries here. It's Joe Douglas's responsibility to have a solid plan B in place. So before we look ahead, right, before we, ask the question, what's next for this Jets team in 2023? How do we move forward? I think it's really, really important to talk about the facts, right? Lean on the facts. Fact number one, the Jets are 1-0. I would feel much differently about the situation if Aaron Rodgers last night was going toe-to-toe with the Bills and he gets hurt with 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter and we barely squeak out a win. Aaron Rodgers went down on the fourth play of the game. The fourth play of the game. The score was 0-0. The Bills were 13-3 a year ago. They've won the division for 3 straight seasons. The Jets went in there without Aaron Rodgers and beat the Buffalo Bills. They faced adversity. They battled back. They played good defense. The running game was fantastic between Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook. We're going to talk about that in a second. And then, of course, the special teams I felt like was great. And ultimately, that's what won them the game. I felt like when players' numbers were called, they went out there and made plays, right? Garrett Wilson did not really have a big night, but he came down with one of the best catches that I've ever seen Garrett Wilson make. Definitely so far this season. On an insane late fourth quarter touchdown. It was unbelievable. Right? We can talk about Jordan Whitehead having 3 INTs, 3 picks, coming in with a hat trick on Monday Night Football. It gets me fired up. It gets me pumped up. Jermaine Johnson with the multiple tackles for loss. Not having Carl Lawson didn't play in the game, but yet we were still able to get after Josh Allen. And my favorite part about the defense in last night's game that frankly was not getting enough credit was the linebacker play. It was really the glue that held everything together. When we talk about what CJ Mosley and Quincy Williams were doing against the run when they were dropping back in coverage, I mean, think about how many times that Josh Allen had, these crazy play extensions. Not so much. Of course, he did break free, a couple times, but Josh Allen is literally one of the most efficient running quarterbacks in football. He's going to get away. He's going to make plays at points in the game. It's just a matter of time. But I felt like from top to bottom, the linebacking play was absolutely fantastic, and it needs to be talked about more, quite frankly. And so this is kind of bleeding into the second fact here. Fact one, again, we're 1-0. We're above 500 at this point. 1 week into the season, we handled business. We got the job done despite what was thrown our way, despite, the ultra curveball and the Aaron Rodgers injury having to come out in the first quarter, first drive. We battled back and won. That second fact, the Jets still, despite the Rodgers injury, have a good football team. They have a good football team. Maybe they're not, going to have the ceiling of an Aaron Rodgers-led football team, of course, obviously, but I still, when I look at this Jets roster, I mean, the defense, the running game, like, there are things that we can lean on here. Zach Wilson is obviously a major, major question mark at the quarterback position. Pass pro, overall pass protection last night was horrendous in my opinion, and it needs to be addressed. It cannot look like that for the remainder of the season, let alone next week against Dallas. Zach Wilson's going to be eaten alive. Thankfully though, the run blocking and pass protection do look night and day, so at least the offensive line can hang their hat on something. But I mean, man, we all watched what this defense did last night. We all watched what Breece Hall was doing with the football in his hands. We saw what Dalvin Cook was doing. We have bright spots on this football team. And to be honest with you, like, what does it say about Saleh? What does it say about Joe Douglas? If Aaron Rodgers were to go down, we're 1-0 in the season, and season's a wrap. It's over. It's like, where's the team building? Where's the leadership from Saleh? Where's the X's and O's from Nathaniel Hackett and Jeff Ulbrich? If Aaron Rodgers goes down and the season's over and we all of a sudden fall apart and are now just this horrible football team, it's like my attention gets turned to those guys. Like, I feel like there's a foundation here. The Jets have tons of solid young players. I mean, think about how many times we said it a year ago. Man, if the Jets only had Breece Hall healthy, if the Jets only had AVT healthy on the offense side of the football, if we weren't cycling quarterbacks in and quarterbacks out all the time, maybe we could look a little bit more consistent on that side of the football. So for me, those are the facts. We're 1-0 and we have a good football team in that locker room. But here's the question. Moving forward, what do we do? Right? Because without Aaron Rodgers, that obviously is a massive wrench thrown into the plans of the 2023 Jets here. What should be the path moving forward? What is the right decision moving forward at the quarterback position? I think this is really broken up into two parts, the short term and the long term. Let's focus in on the short term first, because if the Jets were to bring in another quarterback, it's not like he would come in and play immediately. I would say there's probably at least a 3-week period, a 3 to 4 week period of getting the quarterback not only just comfortable with the system, but comfortable with the verbiage, comfortable with the team, right, in and out of the huddle, creating chemistry with guys like Garrett Wilson and Allen Lazard and all, just the offensive weapons, communication with the offensive staff as a whole. There is that onboarding process. For me, 3 weeks is pushing it. Like, that's going to be pretty close, but I think 4 or 5 weeks is kind of the sweet spot on when we can probably see a quarterback step in and not really game plan with such a limited offensive plan of attack, if that makes sense, right? Where it's just like, all right, well, we only have 50% of the playbook that we have to work with. I think that 4 or 5 week period, say, for example, we bring in a Carson Wentz, we could probably see him within 3 weeks on a limited playbook, limited game plan, or again, that 4 or 5 week spot, maybe at that point, a full go. But no, again, focusing in on the short term, like, there had to be a thought that crossed Joe Douglas's mind that if Rodgers were to go down with injury, Zach Wilson is the backup quarterback. Like, he's QB2. In the event something does happen to A-Rod, Wilson is stepping in. Joe Douglas had tons of opportunities to upgrade the backup quarterback position or add somebody that he felt like could have been potentially better, right? Teddy Bridgewater was out there. We can go down the list of all these different veteran quarterbacks that signed elsewhere. Gardner Minshew, all these different guys, right? The options were a dime a dozen, right? The Jets had plenty of opportunities and they chose to roll with Zach Wilson. Actually, they did bring in Tim Boyle, but when it comes to Wilson versus Boyle, it's clear that the Jets opt for Wilson here. So like that, there is that thought in my mind where it's just like the Jets must be right? Like they must be higher on Zach than a lot of people to keep him as the unquestioned backup quarterback. I don't want to get into like the politics of, him being the second overall pick and, the optics from media and fans. Oh, if the Jets were to part ways with Wilson or if he's all of a sudden QB3, kind of what was going on with San Francisco and Trey Lance. But the 49ers are a good example because Yes, they had Brock Purdy coming back from injury, but it's like, hey, if we don't feel comfortable in Trey Lance being the backup quarterback, or even seeing like starting reps in the event that Purdy goes down, we need to add to the room. They brought in Sam Darnold on an extremely cheap contract. The Jets opted to roll with Wilson, but I do feel like, again, from an organizational to comparing the two organizations, the Jets feel better about Wilson than the Niners did with Lance. So again, going back to the short term, it's looking like it's going to be Zach Wilson at QB, at least for the next couple of weeks. And the team that I talked about in the recap video that I posted last night, a team that we can mirror, whether it is in these next couple of weeks or if it is Zach from here on out, right, for the foreseeable future. It's the 2020 Cleveland Browns. This is a team that went 11-5, Baker Mayfield at the helm, but they were known for pounding the rock. We look at that Browns team, they had a good defense and they had two really, really good running backs, arguably two RB1s. You look at the Jets, a really good defense, two RB1s. I'm not comparing the schemes, right? Those are completely different. But when we start matching personnel, right, when we start looking at philosophy of Kevin Stefanski back in 2020, it was pretty clear. We're going to feed Nick Chubb. We're going to feed Kareem Hunt. We're going to get Baker Mayfield outside the pocket. We're going to let him work off of play action and try to be the point guard of this football team, not allow him to throw tons, 40 plus times per game. We saw that actually with who was the head coach? Freddie Kitchens, right? Freddie Kitchens was having Mayfield operate almost like a college QB, where it's tons of passing attempts every week in, week out. And granted, they had a bunch of weapons and whatnot, but it was just like they had two ultra talented backs, guys with a lot of gas in the tank in Hunt and Chubb. You're looking at what they were able to do again in Stefanski's first season there. It was, let's get back to basics. Let's feed the playmakers. Let's feed the best players on this offense the football and control the game. Get stops defensively, get turnovers defensively, and I feel like that could be the philosophy that the Jets look towards. Again, in the short term, if Zach is going to be the guy. I mean, to me, it just makes sense. And I understand that I'm only looking at one game. Maybe the pass protection improves mightily, but if we just start looking again at the facts here, it's like, okay, Aaron Rodgers gets hurt. Zach Wilson comes in. He's not a top tier backup in football. Pass protection is shaky. We have two really good running backs. When we have handed the ball off, both guys were having success against the Bills, but we kept opting to go away from the run and start trying to fool Buffalo, trying to, be ahead of the curve with play action. And Buffalo was kind of sitting back. I mean, to be honest, the Buffalo Bills defense looked great all night. That was not the reason why the Bills lost. It was because of Josh Allen imploding 4 turnovers, unbelievable stuff. When I'm looking at how the Jets operated offensively, I was extremely disappointed in the first half play calls. What is up with all the throwing? I mean, I feel like, all the variables are pointing to running the football, and we just weren't doing it. And by the way, it wasn't like it was 24-3 or 21-3. It was 10-3, right? So I really didn't understand. It kind of reminded me of Mike LaFleur, just ditching the run game. Down in the game, all of a sudden we have to panic and start throwing. I get that everybody's, in the league today, it's all about throwing, but, there's still something to be said for the running back position, especially a position right now on the Jets that they invested a second round pick in Breece Hall in. And by the way, he looks like a freaking elite back in the NFL. And then number 2, Dalvin Cook's contract. Are you really going to pay him, $7-8 million to throw the football 35-40 times a game, week after week after week? I don't know. To me, I think I'm mentally shifting into more of a ground and pound approach. We have the personnel to do that. So that's my plan in the short term as of right now. Stick to the run game, stick to the ground game, play that good defense, do what they do defensively. They're going to get stops, they're going to get turnovers, they're going to get after opposing quarterbacks. It's just what the Jets defense does. It's just what they do. So at least we have a foundation. At least we have an identity that we can look towards to say, hey, you know what? This can be our style of football in 2023, as opposed to being absolutely clueless going into, game weeks, right? Preparation for games. Dallas this week, New England the following week. But as far as the long-term approach, really, what is the plan here at quarterback? I think regardless, the Jets have to add somebody to that mix. And I really wanted to break this up into multiple categories. Let's start with the most realistic options, which are the available free agents right now. Those are guys that you don't have to discuss a potential trade. You don't have to discuss giving away assets. Let's start with the free agents. Number one, it's Carson Wentz. This was a guy who was drafted into the Eagles organization when Joe Douglas was there, right? So he was a part of the Carson Wentz decision. And obviously, you look at Carson Wentz right now from a talent perspective, he's probably the best available quarterback on the market. Again, just looking at talent here. We can point to numerous seasons where Carson Wentz was the man, right? He was lighting defenses up. He looked like the guy. He looked like a franchise quarterback that was supposed to be in Philly for, 10 years, 10, 12 years. He gets traded to Indianapolis and has a good season. Despite what people say, like Carson Wentz from an on-field perspective, from like a stats perspective, Carson Wentz went out there and did his thing, right? I believe he threw for 27 touchdowns. He had single digit INTs. I believe it was 27 TDs to 7 picks. Completion percentage right around, I think it was 62% with like 3,500 passing yards. Overall, it was a good year. He took care of the football. He was making good decisions. But ultimately, what was the downfall of Carson Wentz in Indianapolis wasn't so much the on the field stuff. Of course, they lost that last week in the season against the Jaguars, essentially kicking them out of the playoffs, kind of like the Packers last season. They lost that game and Indy moved on. And they traded him to the Washington Commanders, where he wasn't all that successful. But it begs the question, why is Carson Wentz being dumped by Philly, then dumped by Indy after one season, and then he was only in Washington for 1 year? It turns out that it's the leadership qualities. It's him as a teammate. It's, the big question of, are you coachable? And right now, based off of reports, it doesn't really seem like Carson Wentz is the biggest leader, is the best, guy to coach if you are, a QB coach or you are an OC. Or in the case of Doug Peterson, an offensive-minded head coach that is really the face of that offense. They're like, you give those numbers to somebody, all the teams out there that have struggled at quarterback for so long, and you have a guy out there who just in 2021 threw for 27 TDs to 7 picks, 3,500 plus passing yards, and he's struggling to, get an opportunity to be a backup, to be a third stringer, to hop on a team's practice squad. There is probably a deeper issue there as far as the leadership and all that stuff is concerned. There's been too many reports from too many in multiple destinations here where that has been a thing. So that's the downside with Carson Wentz. That's why he's still out there and available. But I do feel like it is realistic to bring him in, because I don't think Carson Wentz is looking for a lot of money or anything like that, and the Jets have money to spend, so they could easily bring him in. And then, like we were talking about before, 3, 4, 5 weeks later, or from now, I could see him getting starting reps. And I don't want to dive into like the whole confidence level with Zach, like how this is going to make him feel and all that. It's year 3 with Wilson. He's had plenty of opportunities to show, fans, to show the Jets organization that this is his team, and he just simply hasn't done it. Maybe something changes over these next couple of weeks that makes Joe Douglas and the front office pause for a sec, but I think at the end of the day, I'm personally beyond putting Zach Wilson's confidence level above the team. I just don't really think it's a smart play, to be honest with you. Now, the next available quarterback here is Matt Ryan, another quarterback, much like Wentz, that was released from the Indianapolis Colts. In fact, he was Wentz's replacement in Indy, and it didn't work out. He just looked old. He looked, kind of like a statue back there, provides no mobility from the quarterback position. And we know where Matt Ryan is in his career. He's working with CBS right now. But here's the thing with Matt Ryan, from a mental perspective, from a past offensive system perspective, Matt Ryan has had a lot of experience in a West Coast system. So when you look at that, when you look at his experience, and you match that with Hackett, I don't see a situation where Matt Ryan comes in and it's just like, all right, what is happening here? This is, everybody's speaking a brand new language. Like, this is insane. I don't think I could get the job done. I think Matt Ryan can step in as a veteran, as a great teammate, as a great leader, and be able to pick up on things pretty damn quickly. My issue here, actually, real quick, another positive with Matt Ryan. I believe the Colts are paying him $12 million for the season. They knew that when they released him. So, in theory, the Jets could essentially give Matt Ryan an extremely cheap contract, because he is not only just has made tons of money before, in previous contracts, but he's still getting paid a lot of money from the Indianapolis Colts to kind of offset that. So that is another positive. My issue, though, is once again, it boils down to the pass protection. If I'm talking about Matt Ryan back there, and same could be said for Joe Flacco, he's another available quarterback that I could see potentially, being considered by Joe Douglas because of, him being on the squad these past couple of seasons. I think when I look at this pass protection, and I'm thinking about Joe Flacco and Matt Ryan back there, two guys that provide zero mobility, two guys that are up there in age, I feel like it could get ugly fast. So, that's kind of where I stand on the available guys, or at least the top tier guys. Carson Wentz is probably my front runner for players to add here, because at least Wentz gives you some playmaking ability. I'm not saying he's a top 25 quarterback or anything like that, but Carson Wentz can at least give you some pop, some explosion on the offensive side of the football, something to get excited about. And I'm not saying Matt Ryan can't. I'm just saying Matt Ryan, I feel like, can't with the pass protection of this Jets offensive line. That's what makes me a little bit nervous. When we look at guys that the Jets can potentially trade for, this is where it gets a little weird, because, I think on the surface it makes sense to say, well, what about Bridgewater from Detroit? He's not, he's the backup. He's not seeing any snaps. What about Gardner Minshew for the Colts? This is somebody who threw for 400 plus yards against Saleh's defense a couple years ago when he was on the Eagles. What about Tyler Huntley from the Ravens or Drew Lock from Seattle? Some of these higher end backup quarterbacks, what's going on with these guys? And I just feel like at this point in time, although it makes sense from the Jets' perspective, I don't know if it makes much sense for the other teams involved. If you are the Lions and, you drafted Hendon Hooker, who's, I believe, currently on IR, if Jared Goff goes down and you just traded Teddy Bridgewater to the Jets, yeah, great, you have a draft pick, but, now all of a sudden the Lions are panicking, searching for quarterback options. Their season is in question, just like they're going to be in the same situation that the Jets are. And same could be said with the Colts. Right? If Anthony Richardson goes down and you don't have Gardner Minshew anymore, what are you going to do? So when it comes to Jameis Winston is another guy. Now, Derek Carr has been durable as hell throughout his career. I don't envision an injury, but again, this is football here. Things happen. So I feel like with the high-end backups, it's just going to be a little difficult to pry them away from, another team. But here's the thing. I feel like if the Jets overpay for somebody, at that point, it would say, like, if they give the Lions an offer that they can't refuse for Teddy Bridgewater, I could see Detroit parting ways at that point in time. But it's just like, how much are the Jets willing to give up to go get a high-end backup quarterback? So that's kind of where we stand right now, and I would love to hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. Of course, when this news comes out about Rodgers' injury with the ankle, going to be doing a reaction to it. I got to film the podcast with Tyson from Let's Talk Jets Radio, kind of recapping everything, the game, previewing next week, talking about the Rodgers injury, all that stuff. So a lot of stuff coming, a lot of stuff to look forward to. Despite the Rodgers injury with this Jets team, I still feel like we got a good football team. Like, call me crazy, I still have confidence in the guys in the locker room. I do. Maybe it's not as high with A-Rod, obviously, but I still view this team as one of the better ones in the AFC. So let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Thanks so much for watching. We're 1-0, and as always, go Jets.